Is it ever too late in life to do the things that you've dreamed of doing, or even to find some new adventure, some new interest or hobby? When is it too late? When should we start new endeavors? Should we wait for our children to be grown and out of the house? Should we be in our 40s or 50s? This is one of the many topics that we're going to dive into today. Today, I have with me Kate Champion. She is a licensed mental health professional and the author of best-selling books. You're going to love this. Never Too Late, Inspiration, Motivation, and Sage Advice from 7 later in life athletes. And You Are Limitless, Anxiety, Grief, Trauma, Addiction, 7 inspiring stories of hope and healing. And she also has pocket guides out as well. Kate has spoken nationally and internationally about leadership, addiction, anxiety, wellness, and recovery, and she has lived experience with grief, loss, trauma, and healing. Through her books, her clinical practice, online community, and events, as well as her weekly podcast, Living Big Mindfully, Kate has been serving and supporting people for over 2 decades. Kate, welcome to the show.
Carol, thank you. It's so nice to be here today.
I, I I can't wait to dive into the topic of the 2 books. They both intrigued me. But first, you were born and raised in England, a small rural village just south of London, and you lived on a farm. You were mostly outdoors a lot. Yet, with that background, your connection with nature came later in your mid 50s when you discovered backpacking. And we were talking off camera about this for the listeners. I related to this because everything in life, with the exception of getting married, I married relatively young, I've done later. I had kids in my mid to late 30s and early 40s. I didn't start running marathons until right about the mid 40s. I didn't do bodybuilding shows until I was in my 50s. I didn't start an online business until my late 50s. Didn't start a podcast to write a book until my 60s. So who knows what's up next, but I related to this. So can you speak into that a little bit, Kate? What shifted for you in your mid 50s? Even though you had this background of growing up on a farm, I would think that you'd have been hiking and backpacking your whole life.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I love your story. I mean, it's so, I mean, that is, you are my new kind of goddess, because that's just everything that really resonates with me. Everything. It just proves that it isn't too late, right? I mean, we have all these limiting beliefs, and it just, again, another human being proving that it is never too late to do something, try something, start something. So for me, I am a late bloomer, and I had no interest in the outdoors, no interest in, I wasn't, a runner as a kid. I mean, I had the challenging childhood, so I think there were other more survival things on my mind versus, those kind of fun things. But left home and did travel a little bit after school, and then, but just really life was all about, work, making money, surviving, trying to find my feet, trying to get a sense of kind of who I am, what I'm about. And I do joke, I am a late bloomer, and I also feel like I do everything kind of backwards, right? I had children before I got married, those kinds of things. And then I went back to school late, started my master's degree, et cetera, in psychology, like I was in my late 20s to early 30s. And then had children late, like you, like 30s to 35, had children. And then really didn't started to get into my kind of what I call my personal growth and development, which for me includes the outdoors and that connection with nature, until my mid 50s. I went on my first kind of backpacking 101 trip, and just really something shifted for me with those 3 days, like out in the backwoods with a small group of women. And actually that was the trip that inspired the book Never Too Late. The leader of the hike was a female solo hiker in her 60s. She was 63, and she was taking women out, and she has hiked thousands and thousands of miles, all the big trails like the Appalachian Trail, the Continental Divide, the Mountains to Sea. And she is just this wonderful woman. And again, she's still out there, 60, 65, hiking, backpacking, doing her thing. And she was a huge inspiration for me. And around that campfire that night, that first night, she was telling us a little bit about her inspiration. And she I talked a little bit about Grandma Gatewood. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she is a legend in the hiking, backpacking field. Again, a woman. And in her time, she was a woman, again, had a very challenging childhood, very challenging marriage. You know, she was in her late 60s when she actually hiked the Appalachian Trail. So she's a legend in that kind of hiking community. And her story, along with Yvonne's story, was just resonated with me, and again was the inspiration for my journey, and also the book Never Too Late, because it really felt like, okay, it's really never too late.
Oh my goodness, I love that so much. You know, you were talking earlier about the limiting self-beliefs, and I hope this is not too personal of a question, but what was a
Yeah.
limiting self-belief that you had to overcome, even to be able to take up backpacking in your mid 50s? Because that can be, you know, I've done hiking extensively, backpacking. That can be a little
Hmm.
scary if it's something you know you've never done, and you're out in the wilderness, and is it safe, and all of the things.
Yeah, yeah. So there was a couple, and I'm happy to answer anything. I'm an open book.
Okay.
So there was a couple. The first one was really the fear of being uncomfortable. You know, the fear of like
Mm.
actually sleeping in a tent. I never slept in a tent. I wasn't a camper. Never like. I still don't really like traditional camping. I love backpacking. I don't really like camping. I never camped. I never really slept in a tent. Never interested in any of that. So for me, it was like, am I going to be cold? Am I going to be wet? Am I going to be uncomfortable? It was the you know, I am kind of a creature of comfort. So that was really, I really had to push myself on that one, especially the cold and the wet. I don't like being cold, and I don't like being cold and wet, right? You know, and when you're out there for several days, you can't guarantee the weather, right? So you have to be prepared to be cold and wet and hiking the rain and get soggy socks and all those kinds of things. So that was definitely one thing I had to overcome. And then the other thing was the fear of being solo, right? There's a pretty big primal fear, I think, about sleeping in a tent in the woods by yourself as a woman. Let's face it, right? It's kind of terrifying. I mean, what is culture? The movies, the culture, the messages, like every bad thing is going to happen to you. So that my first night solo in a tent in the woods by myself, that was pretty terrifying. But I did it. I managed. I survived. I'm here to tell the story. So being uncomfortable and really that fear of being alone, right? Fear of being alone and out in the woods just by yourself. So those are two big ones.
Boy, I really related to the being alone factor. That one would get me, being alone in a tent, because I'll have a sense of security. I'll hike with, you know, I've always hiked with my husband. And so that made me, you know, makes me feel like, oh, whatever happens, we've got this covered. But the alone, that would be a big mental barrier for me to get beyond. So you began this backpacking, got completely into it. You write your book, and it was the inspiration was the group leader for the hiking, correct?
Yeah, the inspiration was the woman, and also at that time there were most. At the time I was 55, right? I had just turned 55. The leader was in a 60, 63, 65. There were other women in the group, kind of in my age group as well. So it really helped me see that, you know, we can do these things for as long as we're fit and healthy, and work at it, right? We can work at staying fit, healthy, strong. And you know, the world's our oyster. You know, there's so much opportunity out there, and it's important to be able to take some of that stuff and not have that mindset, I'm too old, or I'm too frail, or I'm too this, too slow, too whatever, right? Yeah, just kind of embrace it, take some baby steps, and you'd be surprised what you can accomplish.
I think in our age group, and I don't know what it was like growing up in Europe or near London, but I knew I grew up in a time where I was told, I mean, literally told, that's not what girls do. And there weren't that many female athletes to look up to. And so women now, I don't think they can really understand how that trail has been kind of blazed for them in a sense, where we had to really overcome some mental
Yeah,
obstacles in most
yeah.
cases.
I mean, I think you have a great point. When in England growing up, truthfully, I'm 60, just going to be 61 in April. So this month. So I'm 61, and growing up in England, I mean, it was very, the fitness industry was nothing. In fact, it was probably ridiculed, right? When somebody saw somebody running or jogging, I can remember like messages from my family, like, what are they doing? Are they crazy? Rah, 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 right? And it just wasn't a thing. And as for food, I mean, we had a diet of literally kind of fat and meat and alcohol and cigarettes and, pounds of butter, right? I mean, it's just a whole different mindset. And as for going out by yourself as a woman, that was definitely a no-no. So I hear you. I really hear you.
It's funny, the first time I went on a long hike with my husband, and he's like, "Why are you stepping deliberately into the mud puddles? You're going to be covered in mud." And it was because my mother was always scolding me, "Don't get muddy, don't get dirty, don't get your shoe." And boy, I got out on the trail and I was going through, and I was wet and cold by the end because I had stepped in every puddle. So it's kind of funny to remember. Now, your second book, You Are Limitless, and you give the 7 inspiring stories of hope about addiction, grief, and trauma. And you have a phrase that you actually use this on your website to describe the book, that these individuals discovered hope through nature and movement. Can you unpack this a little bit about how this happened?
Yeah, so I can totally unpack that. So that, when you write a book, there's usually a personal component. So as a child, there was a lot of grief, loss, and trauma, right? So I personally had a lot of healing to do. And again, that kind of came later in life. I was doing, all the things, right? But not really taking care of my inner self and kind of healing the wounds that I had picked up along the way. So this book came after Never Too Late. So I was about 57, I think, 57, 58 when that book came out. And I'm also a therapist, right? So I was able to use, my lived experience of grief, loss, trauma. I also have addiction in my background. And I wanted to kind of bring in also my therapy hat, right, of helping people in recovery, people that struggle with grief, loss, and trauma, because that's really what I do for a living as a professional. And I wanted to kind of bring in a little bit of my own personal journey of how I use movement, right? So hiking, backpacking, trail running, out in the woods, out on the trail was a huge part of my own personal healing process. Yes, I've done therapy. Yes, I've done all the things. But honestly, the getting out in the woods and really, it's hard to explain, hard to put words on it, really kind of shedding through those layers of loss and grief and tears, and have been, just leaving all that on the trail has been so powerful for me in my healing journey. So that's the healing piece, and that's the movement piece, right? So that was the inspiration for the story. And then finding other people that have also used, the combination of healing and movement in their own recovery stories. Because I'm not unique, right? I'm not the only person that has been helped in this way. So this book is all about, 7 people, highlighting 7 people that have also used, movement and nature in a way to help them heal from some of these things.
I know for me, getting out in the woods, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I also have a background of trauma, and I'm still been working many, many years on the healing process. But when I am in nature like that, and it's so vast, I feel the same way if I'm on a ship in the middle of the ocean and we're on a cruise. I love to just sit out on the deck and look at how vast the ocean is. It's so healing for me to feel like I'm a little part of this bigger, greater creation right in front of me. And there's something about the mountains and it being in the middle of nowhere and just hearing, sticks crack or the wind whistle through the trees and the different smells. And it just does take you to a unique place.
It really does. And for me, all of that, I completely resonate. But for me, it's also, it's also a full body nervous system response. So I can be, busy again, running the business, doing all the things. And then, a few hours into the woods, you can literally at some point feel, right, because you've been walking or running or hiking, you can literally feel your nervous system, your whole body just go, right? I mean, it's just such a beautiful full body response. And it's so powerful. And I really think it's so close to our natural state. Like when we're born, right, we're born in this blanket of warmth. We don't know grief. We don't know trauma. We don't know loss. We haven't experienced any of those things when we're freshly born. It's just, and it takes me back in my body, in my nervous system. It takes me back. It's like being wrapped in a warm blanket of love, right? It's just like, oh, so healing for me. And then I can, spend my time in the woods and then get out and I can face the day again and face all the things. But it's a huge part of my mental wellness for sure.
Yes. A couple of things were just kind of floating around in my mind as you were speaking. Do you see individuals that, okay, it can be so helpful to be out in nature and have this movement, but do you see individuals that are taking that so far as a way of not coping or not dealing? I don't know if that's making sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. I do see people sometimes just using exercise, any kind of exercise, right? Whether it's with the gym or running or trail running or ultra marathons that are maybe haven't, they're using it as distraction, right? They're using it as a way not to feel, right? They're using it as a way to kind of power through and not deal with the internal wounds or whatever they have. So yeah, I think it can be used. I think it can be a double-edged sword, but you really have to know, you really have to know yourself. If you're if you're out on the trail and it's more of this kind of frantic energy, right? I've got to go, and there's a lot of competition, and there's a lot of like aggression, and there's a lot of like, there's no time, right? It's all pressure, rush, goal oriented. It's all about the prize, right? That's probably not doing a lot for healing. I mean, it might be doing a lot for your cardiovascular system and your exercise, but that's not doing a lot for healing. That's somebody out there doing, if that's a different purpose. And I'm not knocking that, it's all fine, but those are two very different things, right? The athlete that's out there for the prize and the win and the number one, it's a very different energy for that person that's out there to really kind of soak it all in and breathe and look at the trees and kind of do all that stuff. Very different. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I think you hit on it. The difference of how someone can tell, am I grounding in nature? Am I really enjoying this movement or exercise or even yoga, whatever they like to do? Or am I frantically doing this to get to the end? Because I definitely was the frantic exerciser prior to being in my early 50s, and I had a back injury. And it just, and I mean, it knocked me out. I couldn't do a thing. I couldn't do a thing. I was in so much pain. And the healing was what took a long time. I still have trouble with my back to this day. But what I noticed was everything shifted after that. So when I do take a hike now, the Carol that went through that experience, it's exactly what you describe. I don't care if people pass me. Now, the old Carol would have been, well, we better keep, I'd be looking behind me. Let's pick it up. Come on. Because we got to be ahead of them and we got to be faster and more powerful. And I wouldn't even be enjoying what was around me. It was something to be conquered, not enjoyed. And boy, the shift, because that back injury forced me to slow down and kind of sit in the discomfort of certain things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would imagine that time for reflection, right? You really had to think about, how do you identify, right? How do you really see yourself and really reflect on some of the things you were doing, right? Some of your thinking, feeling, lifestyle choices. Yeah. These things serve us, right? I had in my, I don't know, late 30s, I had woke up one day and really I didn't know this at the time, woke up one day and I literally couldn't move, and my body kind of seized up and I was having all kinds of physical problems, and I was eventually diagnosed with a severe case of rheumatoid arthritis, right, which is a pretty severe autoimmune disease. And that was a time when I was like, oh my gosh, that was terrifying for me because have been so active. But that also, through that illness, through that disease, through that syndrome, I have learned. It was a sign. It was a signal for me that I had to deal with the loss. I had to deal with the trauma. I had to look at my lifestyle. Right? I had to look at the way I was living life and showing up every day. I had to look at the food, right? At the time, I was eating a lot of sugar and processed foods, right? Because I was just frantically trying to feed this empty, cavernous hole I had, right? I had to really look at exercise and just really, it changed my life, Thankfully, today I'm completely in remission and symptom-free, which I'm incredibly grateful for. But I do believe that was a thing that was given to me that I just was able to learn and heal. And that was I think that was probably really the start of my healing journey, like from scratch, right? The complete breakdown, and now the build up again, right? We get broken down, but then we get to build up again afterwards.
The comeback. I have a very similar story. We have a lot in common, but my RA was diagnosed the same year as the back injury, so I got a double whammy here. That was very hard, but it did bring me into therapy, and it allowed me to really heal from things I had just never acknowledged or healed from. And so it was a blessing, I guess you could say, in that it moved me into a different place. But boy, we have a lot in common.
Yeah, we do. And I can really relate to that. For me too, I had a lot of stuff under the hood that I wasn't even aware of, right? So it wasn't like I wasn't even ignoring it, right? Because I wasn't even aware of it, right? Because you don't know really what you don't know.
Right.
And it's not until you start to kind of dig in and, and really begin to look in the corners, right, that you begin to, start to feel the grief, the loss, the trauma, the blah, blah, blah. I mean, it can be, the body is powerful, right? The body is going to start to tell you if there's something wrong, if you need to deal with something. I mean, the body is full of wisdom and information. And I think that's another great thing about being out on the trail, right? Being in nature. If you can slow down enough, you can begin to listen to the body, right? What does the body need? What is the body telling you? What's coming up, and then it gives you an opportunity to investigate and discover some of these pockets of emotions or whatever it happens to be. Yeah, it's powerful stuff.
It is. And you're right. We're largely unaware. And I think as women, I know I was like this. I was just rushing from thing to thing to thing. I had my kids. I had ailing parents that I was taking care of. This was in my 40s. And there was no time to think about Carol or anything with Carol. I was just in the moment. You recently did a solo podcast on your show about being intentional. And I thought that was really good because that gets thrown around. You're in yoga, and I know I'm yoga certified. And so it was always start the session with set your intention. And I don't know, it never made that much sense to me. I guess I'm like, yeah, right. Okay, whatever. But I think doing things intentionally makes a huge difference because, and again, as women, if we're caretakers, we're working jobs, we're taking care of our kids and parents, it can feel like life is sweeping you along, not like you're living daily with intention.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So at this point in my life, again, at 60, the last 5 years or so have really been growing this awareness. Again, I didn't have it earlier, but growing this awareness about really this question, right? This question for me is like, okay, what do I really want? I'm not going to be alive forever. Nobody is, right? There is we all have an expiration date, right? And I'm thankful enough to be kind of fit and healthy and active and, sound mind and body, touch wood, right? So this next phase, right? This next chapter of my life, I feel like it's full of opportunity, and I really want to use these next years, however many I have, with intention. So it's that question, right? We drop into our system and say, okay, what do I really want? And that doesn't have to be the big life question. It can be like today, right? What do I really want? What's important to me today? What do I really want to accomplish today? What do I want to focus on today? And for me, it's generally 2 or 3 things. I definitely want to work out. I definitely want to have some mindfulness. I definitely want to have some time outside. No, these aren't big things, these aren't big things. But if I can sprinkle some of that into my day every day, then I can go to bed feeling like today was in some way about me, right? Today I did get to do something that really filled up my cup, right? I was able to pour into myself a little bit, and like like every woman out there, they're pouring into everybody else, right? The gazillions of family members, caregivers, businesses, we're pouring into so much, and oftentimes we are on the back burner. We don't pour into ourselves. So just that question, okay, what's really important for me today? It's such a powerful question, and it can kind of set your little compass for the day, right? You can do all the things, and you get to do a couple of these things that are really important to you.
It's interesting how the 60s, that decade, and I'm sure it's different for everybody, but for me, it did change how I thought about things. Because turning 50, I was like, oh, my body's starting to change. And so it was all about what can I do to, lift weights, make myself, and that's how I got into bodybuilding. I was focused on the aesthetics. And then I hit 60, and it was like somebody flipped a switch. It not that I don't care about how I look or looking good in my clothes. Yes, those things matter, but they matter
Mm-hmm.
less than they
Mm-hmm.
used to, for sure. And I'm sure you noticed some shifts like that too.
Absolutely. So, I was listening to something the other day. It really resonated with me on this subject. I mean, when you really think about it, right? There's so many messages in this culture about aging and getting older and, blah, 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 and a lot of not great messages either, again, especially for women. But I heard the other day, and it really resonated, that really, when you think about it, the only thing that really ages is the vessel, right? Is the skin. It is the vessel. Our thoughts don't age, right? Our dreams don't age. Our hopes don't age. Our beliefs, we can constantly update and change our beliefs, right? The opportunities, they don't go away, right? The opportunities in the world that are out there, they don't age. So really, when we think about aging, right, the only thing that's changing is this kind of the outer layer, right? Our spirit doesn't age, our soul doesn't age, and I think we've just really missed a lot of that. We define the body, the skin, as everything, but it really isn't. And most of our components that make us up don't age. We're ageless, right? And it kind of goes to that limitless, right? We're ageless and we're also limitless, right? In our scope, right? In the way, the way we can live and the way we can show up every day. And I'm feeling really emotional saying that. I really believe that is the truth. Right? I think more people really need to hear that we are pretty much ageless, and it doesn't end just because we're 60 or 50 or 70, right? We just got to live the life.
You described that so beautifully, that people do get it kind of mixed up in their head. Like, okay, the aging shell, they think, oh, all of the opportunities are gone, all of the hopes, the dreams, and it is not like that. You are, I know I'm just as powerful with those hopes and dreams, probably more so now than I was at 25.
Yeah, yeah. And listening to your story, listening to my story, right? I started a podcast, book, two or three books, 5 books between, 55 and 60. I started a podcast at 60, went on my first, hiked 100 miles last year. I was, 59, right? I mean, it's just, it's limitless, right? If you can dream it, you can do it, right? Especially today with the internet, you can have so much access. You can learn about things, you can discover things, you can explore things, you can, there's so many ways to figure it out. So it's a fun age. It's a fun time, right? I think we have a lot of privilege. It's a fun time to be 60, right? As women, I think it's a great time to be 60 as women. And I'm just really excited that we can get to enjoy it. Yeah.
Most definitely. Now, I'm going to shift gears just a little bit because I was thinking about the preparation. When you said 100 miles, that really hit me. I felt those 100 miles. How do you prepare? How do you prepare mentally and physically for such an endeavor?
Yeah, so I love those longer hikes. So that's my favorite thing to do. I love the longer, harder, challenging, 5 days in the backcountry. So for me, mentally, I don't know, it wasn't such a big deal. I just had it plan. You plan, right? You plan it. You get your gear. You get your equipment. It's pretty simple. And I'm saying that for me, it's pretty simple. The food was the biggest thing for me because I eat. I'm an eater, and it was 5 solid. We want to do the 100 miles in 5 solid days. So there was no off trail. So we carried everything, right? So shelter, our food for 5 days, and we could get water along the way with filtering streams and things like that. But we did carry the food for 5 days. And when you're backpacking for that amount of time, weight, right? Weight. It was the Superior Hiking Trail, which is pretty gnarly, a lot of hills, right? A lot of elevation. So the weight, your pack weight, you've got to really try and dial it down to bare minimum. So for me, the food was a challenge, and then just the comfort thing, right? The I don't like to be cold and I don't like to be wet. So it's like, okay, how am I gonna manage that? And we were blessed with the most beautiful weather. We didn't have a drop of rain in 5 days. It probably would have been a different experience if we had like rain for 5 days, right? That would have been tougher. But so you prepare, you take it a day at a time, you get your stuff ready, you figure out what works before you go, right? So a few test runs, right? If you're thinking about it, join some groups, get a coach, look at some YouTube videos, test your equipment first, get your food dialed in, make sure everything you take works for you in whatever you need. I'm not a meat eater, so for me, I need certain food and certain protein has to come in a certain way. So it's just really getting the food in. And then once you've got your systems, I like to pack in systems. So sleep system, hydration system, cook, food system, and then your shelter. Once you kind of got those systems and you got equipment that's, a good fit for you, then, take a few test hikes, take a few test runs, and off you go. It doesn't have to be too difficult, really.
What would you say to the woman who they're listening to you and they're going, yeah, this is all well and fine, Kate, but I can't stand being outside because I've heard that. I recently saw someone doing a reel, and she's, I think, 65, gorgeous. She looks like a model, just beautiful. And she was talking in her New York accent about how no one was going to catch her out on a hike ever. She wasn't going to be out there with the bugs and the wet and the cold.
Yeah. I mean, it's not for everybody. I mean, it isn't for everybody. I've got friends that will do kind of a couple. They'll do some day hikes, but they're not gonna be out for 5 days in the middle of nowhere with me. I mean, they're just not. So I would say honor that, right? If it's not you, don't force it. That's okay. Maybe you could go to the park, take a walk. If you're trying to connect with nature, if you're trying to get some outside time, it doesn't have to be 5 days in the backcountry. Go to the park, sit by a pond, right? I mean, just go to your local botanical garden and walk through and look at the flowers. I mean, that can all give us a sense of being connected with nature. It doesn't have to be, something big and gnarly like that. So I would honor, as a therapist, I want to always start where people are, right? I want to know about her why not, right? How has she learned that this is going to be horrible? How has she learned that I don't like bugs and I don't like cold? I want someone to explore her why a little bit, meet her where she is, and then help her, with some baby steps, And then who knows? In a year, she might be knocking on my door saying, "Hey, I want to take one of those hiking trips," and that's like, great, let's go. Yeah. Never say never.
Never say never. Yeah, you make a good point about having that lower barrier to entry, because I work as a health coach, fitness coach, and I'm constantly helping people with their exercise and their nutrition and lifestyle habits. And sometimes you gotta get the barrier of entry low. And I don't mean that in a condescending way. I just mean like let people have a way to implement, because it can be overwhelming to feel like you got to do 8 things at one time.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a Facebook group, a private Facebook group, and it's called the Back of the Pack. And we have a lot of people in there, like a little later in life, but they're doing all kinds of amazing things. And sometimes we'll do a challenge, like we did a challenge for March. And there's a couple of comments like, this is too much for me. How far do we have to go? And I'm like, it's fine. I mean, I'm okay with if the cardio part, if it's to the mailbox and back, if you've been sitting on the couch for a year, right? So again, it's just starting where you are and having some compassion for yourself and not getting wrapped up into this competition about, oh, they're doing this and the comparison. They're doing this and she's doing that and I could never do this. We really want to stay away from that kind of thinking because it's not helpful.
Yeah, women tend to, I don't think men do this as much, or they do it differently maybe, but women definitely compare themselves ability wise, physically. Look what she's doing. Oh, I'm so far back here. And they can
Yeah.
really, really get caught into it. And you make a point about it can be something so simple. Like we get beautiful sunshine here in New Mexico, and some days, I mean, in the summer it's hot, but let's say it's been kind of cold and that sun's coming in the window, and you're not even outside, but you're just sitting there with for me, it's a cup of coffee, and I'm looking out at the mountains and the sun coming in that
Mhm.
window, and I feel that same connection.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, and you're right. For me, when I come home from work, sometimes, right, it's getting out. You've been in the office all day, back to back people. I get out, and before I come into the house, I'll stand like in the garden in the yard, literally put my bag down and just look up and just take a few, 3 or 4 big breaths. I'll look at the sky, right, look at the stars, just really, really take in this massive view. I'll connect my feet into the ground, which is really grounding and super powerful. And just right there in like 3 minutes, I mean, that is again enough to bring my nervous system like, as I transition from this busy day and then walk into the house. And also, honestly, that's another example of the way we can live intentionally, right? We can put those little intentional breaks in there. Look at the sky, look at the horizon, look at the mountains, take a few breaths, and that sometimes is just enough. Right? It's enough to get us to get us through to that next chore. As women, we have so many chores and so many to dos, but it can be beautiful pauses kind of throughout the day.
Pauses. I recently interviewed a cancer survivor, and she used that same term of
Mm,
pausing in the day when she's under stress or feeling that stress start to creep up. And for me, what I often do is there'll be a beautiful moment. Like I might be sitting at the table with all of my kids together and having dinner. They're all grown now. And I'll just say to myself, you'll never have this moment. You'll have other moments, but you won't have this
yeah,
particular moment. Just stop right now, put down your phone, be present, and take in this moment.
yeah, that's beautiful. Another beautiful example of really living intentionally, right? Just noticing what we have here right now and just soaking it up. Yeah, it's really powerful. Really powerful.
What advice would you give to, say, a woman, she's in her 40s, she's right in that window where maybe she's working a desk job all day long. I give this example because I see it a lot. And they can't get their
Mm,
movement in because they work so many long
mm,
hours. And and then they're going to their kids' sporting events on the weekends. They don't have
yeah,
any room in their day.
yeah.
What advice would you
Yeah.
give them?
Yeah, and frankly, I've worked with a lot of women like that. And so, first of all, my heart goes out to them because also there's a lot of anxiety, right?
Yeah.
A lot of
Hmm.
anxiety in that kind of scenario. So I would say, I mean, it goes back to these little moments, right? If you don't have, the half an hour, maybe you have 10 minutes. And could you get out for 10 minutes at lunchtime, right? And if you can't get out for 10 minutes, can you sit in your office for 10 minutes quietly and maybe do some breath and some mindfulness, Could you do, like, when you're watching that sporting event, is there a way that you could do a 10-minute walk, like around the park or around the building, or is there a way you can just squeeze some of this in? And if you can't, then you can't, and if you can't, then it's all about self-compassion and not beating yourself up, right? Not saying, oh my gosh, I didn't do it again, right? It's like, okay, I can't get it today, but I am going to, before I go to bed tonight, I'm going to at least say 3 things I'm grateful for. At least take the time to do some mindful breaths and just at least, have a little 3-minute gratitude practice or something at the end of the day. And then I would encourage them to let's begin your day with something. Let's begin your day with at least 3 minutes of something for you, right? Something about kind of gratitude, or again, setting some intention for the day, or just a quiet moment when you are looking out the window and you're having that cup of coffee. I have one woman I work with, and it's like we came up with this because she's exactly in that. I mean, she's a therapist, and she's got kids and a single mom and all the rest of it. And we came up with this. She gets up in the morning, she makes her coffee, and she sits and she crochets for 10 minutes, and the house is quiet. She's crocheting, and then the hands and the wool and the coffee, it's changed her life, right? 10 minutes, right? She gets up at 15 minutes earlier, which isn't a big deal. She's still surviving the day, but just has brought her, I don't know, it's the thing that she does for her every day. She looks forward to, and it was a beautiful thing, right? So something like that, and knowing, the other thing I would say, knowing this will all pass, right? In 5 years or 10 years, your life is going to look very different, right? This is all temporary. All the kids, all the sports, all the stuff, it's all temporary. It's all going to pass.
Oh, beautiful point. Because I think a lot of times when you're in the throes of that, it's kind of like when your kids are really little and they're in the diaper stage. You feel like that's just going to go on and on for decades. And it's not. You move through these seasons. And then the crocheting, I was kind of laughing because I thought, oh, what causes stress relief for one individual would cause another to be stressed out. And I tried crocheting once, and it was really quite the nightmare. So
Really?
I was laughing, going, yeah, I'd be pretty stressed in those 10 minutes.
What a creative idea. I mean, I didn't think of that for her clearly. It was the last thing on my list. I don't think I've never crocheted, right? But, we were brainstorming, but it's an example of really coming together and meeting her where she is, and helping her see that she could get 10 minutes of relief, and now that crochet thing, she's taken it into a day, and sometimes she'll sit with the kids and watch a TV show, and she'll crochet and blah, blah, blah. But she's gone from this scattered, busy to-do list to little pauses kind of throughout the day. And again, it's really helped the nervous system, helps her anxiety, and she's much happier. And our kids are much happier, clearly, right? Yeah.
And healthier. I don't think people
Yeah.
understand what's going on internally when they're stressed, and sometimes they don't even know they're stressed. I wear an Oura ring, and it just recently released a feature where it tracks your stress, and it's pretty darn accurate, right down to I could be sitting and thinking something stressful, and that ring is picking it up. And a couple of
Yes.
years ago, I wore a continuous glucose monitor because I wanted to optimize my metabolic health, and was quite surprised how stress raises your blood sugar, like a great big spike. And there's
Mm-hmm.
all these internal things going on. So I think having some type of stress management tools,
Yeah.
whatever works. I mean, petting your dogs, hugging your kids, whatever works is
Yeah.
huge. Is very impactful.
Yeah, it's vital. I mean, stress is the root of anxiety, right? I mean, the anxiety is an epidemic, and we are just overwrought with stress and anxiety in this time. So yeah, the stress management techniques are vital for health, longevity, and staying well for that long haul, right? I mean, it's vital. Yeah.
Yes, most definitely. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, Kate, as we start to wrap up. A couple questions for you. First of all, is there something we didn't unpack, talk about that would be that you want the listener to know? And then also, how can women get a hold of you, uh, find your books and connect with you?
Yeah. So I think I just would like to finish up with saying, I do have a couple of things that might help women if they are thinking about hiking. I do have a free hiking guide, and it does talk about some of the fear, some of the things that we talked about today. And it also talks about helping the people at home, right? Because it's not just our fear, but our loved ones' fear, right? My husband had a lot of fear about, oh my gosh, you're going to do what? And right. So it's helping the people at home staying calm and helping ourselves. So that's a gift. And then talking about stress management, I do have a little pocket guide, 12 ways to kind of calm the nervous system. And again, that's a no cost resource, and just 12 simple ways to take a pause through the day. So I would encourage listeners to jump onto that. And then as to where you can find me, everything is at katechampionauthor.com. Podcasts, books, communities, it's all there.
I will make sure all of that is in the show notes so people can access those free guides, connect with you, and your Facebook group sounds really cool. I think I've got to join that Facebook group.
It is fun. I get a lot of great feedback about it's so kind and so caring and so supportive and so inspirational, and I'm really proud of it. It's just I think community is really important. Maybe that's the last thing I might say. Community of like-minded people is really important. And I started that group because I didn't have community, but it's grown over time, and it's really a great space. So if you need a little extra support, guidance, inspiration, and we do some fun challenges, and come and join the group, Back of the Pack. It's on Facebook, and we'd love to have you.
Oh, thank you so much, Kate. The work you're doing is so valuable, allowing women, well, really everyone, if they want to dive into your books and your resources, to first of all find ways to calm that central nervous system down, and then find the things that light you up, regardless of whether you're 50, 60, 70, 80, and beyond. Setting those goals and finding what brings you joy. So important. So
That's
thank you,
right.
Kate.
You are welcome, and thank you for all you do too. It's been so fun and a pleasure.
Thank you. And as we wrap up, as always, we want to wish our listeners every blessing wherever you are in the world. Bye for now.